Well, I am here today with Shannon Earley. Shannon, thank you so much for being with me today.
You're welcome. I'm very pumped.
So Shannon and I are a part of a group for female podcasters online, and that's how I came in contact with her. And then we had a phone conversation last week, and I thought, oh my gosh, joy just like exudes from this girl. We're going to have so much fun when we talk. So I'm looking forward to our conversation today. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so my name is Shannon Earley. I'm the hostess of the Mamas Need Love podcast. I have a super heart for mothers, especially in the throes of motherhood. Just, I know it can be really difficult or lonely, and I just want to be that encouraging voice, that cheerleader that's, in their ear during the day. But personally, I'm a homeschooling mom of 4 children. 2 of my children have autism. One has this rare genetic disorder. Our house is bananagrams. And I've been married to my best friend and husband since 2010. Wow. So our house is bananas and I love moms. That's basically me.
You could turn that into a t-shirt.
I know. That's right.
That's amazing. So you have this podcast and you're kind of rebranding it, and tell me what it is that you like to talk about when you are on your podcast.
Well, first of all, I was not always a Christian. I became a Christian when I was an adult. And so it's really important to me. I kind of want to reach the moms that are on the fringe of Christianity, maybe the moms that have already turned it down, or, I just want to be that ease into Christianity that these ladies need, something that's friendly and encouraging. And so basically, I talk to other people that are generally women. I think I've had one man on the show, and that's because he was a eye doctor for children. But I talk to women, and they generally are giving their stories, whether it's, their birth story or ways to become, an entrepreneur, or tips on uncluttering your home. So it's all just different women that are there to encourage each other.
I love that. I think we need that encouragement as moms. And sometimes some of us have it in spades, and then sometimes you can really feel alone and not really be sure where you're going to look for that. So now you and I, like I said, chatted last week, and your story is, oh my gosh, you've got so many parts of your story. And so I was like, well, we could talk about this and we could talk about that. And you're like, let's talk about all of it.
Yeah, I know. I'm so sorry, everybody. I'm verbose. So
no, it's great. I mean, anyone who knows me knows the reason I have a podcast is because I can talk. I always say that my brothers hated the fact that I never stopped talking. And so I just found a job that requires me to talk all the time.
Yeah, it's like you get and then your husband's ear gets just a little bit of a reprieve, because you're not just jamming him all day with all your thoughts. That's what I love about it.
There you go. So can you talk a little bit about your past and how that kind of helped you become the person you are today?
Yeah. So, first of all, what's the word? Trigger warning for people, just so you know, it could be a little bit triggering. So like I said, I didn't grow up as a Christian. My mom was this super opinionated, spunky Italian woman. My father was a U.S. Marshal, and everything just kind of had to be just so in the family. And so I grew up feeling like I really wanted to be a people pleaser. I didn't want to share struggles with my parents, or let's say I got to be on a test, I would hide it, that kind of thing. And when I was 13 years old, there was an 18-year-old boy who would rape me at the bus stop most days. And I would then go home and I would, feel strange and weird and disconnected. And my mom was so angry with me, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you not talking to me? Or, why are you being so distant? And then so our relationship started to get even more of a wedge. And this went on for a couple of years. And, at the time I didn't have a strong identity in Christ. I didn't know what my real value was or my real worth was. And I think that also compounded the fact that it was happening. It was obviously you don't have worth because this is happening. And because, I don't know, it was just a cycle.
So I'm going to pause right here because we are having connection issues, but this is too important of a conversation for us not to continue. So YouTube audience, you guys are going to you can see our pictures, but you can't see our faces. Please stick around and hear the rest of Shannon's story. So Shannon, please continue.
Okay, so excellent. So I end up meeting when I'm 19 years old. I meet this guy who ends up being a bodybuilder. He was massive, and I thought, this is the guy for me because he can protect me from people that are bad. Like he can protect me from all the bad people that I've met throughout my life. Like this will be great. And it was actually the first time I had ever met somebody that identified as a Christian.
Huh.
And, we ended up moving in together. And it's different when you're not a Christian, just different rules apply.
True.
So I moved in with him, and he would read the Bible every single day. Every day he would come home from work, and the first thing he would do is open up his Bible and pray. And he would immediately afterwards get high. And again, this was like my first experience with Christian. And he was extremely abusive. He ended up being physically abusive. And the worst part, like, even though God used all of this, the frustrating part is I'm still missing a tooth because of him. And it's one of those things my children are like, Mom, like, why is your baby tooth not growing in? It's like, I'm not going to go tell them what's going on. But it's one of those things that's like, it's just a real sad reminder. I just really hate that.
Yeah.
Anyways, so he would read the Bible, get high, and he was just awful. He would say things like, you can only go to the grocery store for X amount of time. If you're over that, there's no reason to be. He would make me go to the bathroom with the door open. He started telling me what to wear. These are all super big red flags, girls, just so you know. And also the fact that I was sexually abused when I was only 13, when you already have abuse in your life, you tend to make that situation over again. You just get into a cycle. So girls, just be strong and get out of that. So he also would start to, he isolated me from my family and my friends, which is another thing that abusers do. They like to take away everybody so that you only rely on them. And so at this point, I was feeling really lonely. I had nobody. He had me under his thumb, and he let me get a puppy. And I was so excited. I had this puppy. Well, he ended up using the puppy to keep me in line. He would kick her instead of kicking me. Wow. And she was so tiny, and it was awful. So I would either do one of two things. I would either go walk around the apartment complex for like hours. People would come out and they would say, "Oh, you're looking so good. Keep up all that exercise. You look great." And I'm like, "Thanks." Like, I've always had the same personality that I do now. And I'd be like, "Oh, thanks. I really appreciate it." But if I didn't go on a walk, I would hide in our closet. Wow. And we had this long walk-in closet in the apartment. And one day he was particularly angry, and I'm in the closet with my dog just so he will leave us alone. And I scooch all the way back, and there was a shoe rack hanging up, and out of the shoe rack, a Bible pops out. And I was like, what? What is a Bible doing here? Like, I had no idea why there would be a Bible in the closet. It was the weirdest thing. And it was before smartphones. So I was like, well, I've got nothing else to do. I just got to kill time. I might as well open up the Bible and read,
Yeah.
And for the very first time in my life, I just cracked open the Bible, and I read the story of Jesus walking on water. And I think it's one of those things that so many of us hear the story, but I think actually reading it and physically holding it in my hands was just entirely different. And if you reread it, you'll notice that he's not just walking on water, he's walking through stormy seas in order to get to his terrified disciples. And then with the power of his hand, he can calm those seas. And I thought, it was like lightning bolt went through my head, all the way through my body and out my toes. And I thought, if he has that much power and he went through a storm to go to his disciples, then he can save me. Wow. And so I prayed right then and there. I said, Lord, or maybe I said Jesus, I'm not sure, but I was basically like, if you can get me out of this situation, I'll follow you the rest of my life. I later learned that that's called a foxhole conversion, and it happens a lot for men that are like at war or something.
Yeah.
And I'm thankful mine stuck, because a lot of times they might not stick. And through this just miraculous thing happened, that like 3 days later, he decides he's going to go visit his cousin in another state, which he's never done in 2 years. Does not leave me alone. Like I
Mm-hmm.
told you, I had to go to the bathroom with the door open. And he decides he's going to go visit his cousin. So I called my parents that morning and I was like, will you please save me? Get me out of here. Help me.
Yeah.
My dad, like I said, was US Marshal. He was also kind of a workaholic and he was off that day from work. Not just that,
Mm,
he had just bought a new truck on this like amazing deal from somebody.
yeah.
And so he ended up getting all of like he got his partners and some other people to come. They all had their guns on their hip and they came in and they emptied my apartment from soup to nuts in 4 hours.
Wow.
And I was just in so I was while they were taking things out, I was just crying and screaming on the floor. Like my whole body was cramping because I was terrified. I was so scared if my ex came home, he would kill me. Like I just knew it. And so I was just absolutely terrified. And when I got to my parents' house that night, I ended up going to sleep in a bed and I slept for 24 hours straight.
Yeah.
And when I woke up, it things just felt different. They just felt so different. It was undeniable what God had done. It was undeniable how Jesus used people to help me. It was just
Wow.
so miraculous. And he answered my exact prayer. And I made him a promise. And I've been following him since that day. My life is just so different. And I'm so thankful now that I went through those circumstances because I think when people have a perfect life, it's got to be harder to follow Jesus. I think when you go through the pits of despair and muck and mire and Jesus saves you from that, it is so much easier to imagine him saving you from hell or saving you from your
Mm,
sin or saving you from darkness because he actually did it, you know?
yeah.
So
Wow.
I have my salvation verse is tattooed on my arm. It's Psalm 41-4. And I
Yeah.
have it memorized ish. So I'll tell you if I'm
Go
wrong.
ahead. Yeah.
It says, I waited patiently for the Lord. He turned to me and heard my cry. He lifted me out of the muck and mire and placed me on a firm rock to stand. He put a new song in my mouth, a song of praise to the Lord. Many will see and fear the Lord. That's my salvation verse. He picked me out of that muck
That's
and
good.
mire. So, and it's interesting because it's not like that was, it's not like, okay, well, since I've become a Christian, everything's been perfect. Like it's definitely not like that at all. The difference is that I have a constant relationship with Jesus, that he's just always there. Like I'm in a constant conversation with him. My kids know, like, oh, if mom's mumbling to Jesus right now after we acted up, like we better run away. Or like, oh, mom just saw a bird. She's talking to, she's thanking God to Jesus. We know that she's thanking God for this bird or whatever. So
Hmm.
it's just kind of a constant. It's not like I get on my knees and begin to pray. It's just more like, Lord, thanks for this. Guys, look at what Jesus did today. Look at the
Yeah.
sky, things like that. So,
Wow.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that story is one. I mean, you're listening to and you're picturing this kind of broken person, especially when you're talking there at the end about the emotions that were overcoming you as your dad is helping to get you out of that situation.
Mm-hmm.
And and then you said you went and slept for 24 hours. And
Mm-hmm.
I can just imagine that it was probably the first amount of peaceful sleep you'd had in
Yeah.
in 2 years.
Yeah. It
And
just gave me goosebumps when you said that because it's, like I can say the story without crying now, but there's certain parts that are so poignant to me. But
mhm,
that was, I think, the first time I felt safe in such a long time.
mm,
And I think it was the first time that like healing was actually going to begin because my parents had no idea about the past either. And so
okay.
now I had to tell them about what's happening in the present. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It was like it was out there for everybody to know. And there's actually some scripture, I think it's in First John or something, or maybe just the book of John. I don't know, but it talks about um whoever's there's no darkness in the light, and basically whoever's in the light, all things are going to be in the light, and Jesus is part of the light. And it was
Mhm.
like it reminded me that like keeping those secrets, it's not doing any good. Satan's going to fester off of those and lie to me constantly, but if
Yeah.
I can keep things out in the light, then it gives God the opportunity to heal it.
Yeah. You know, coming out of a situation like that uh is not the end. I know that
Right.
there's always a process. So what did life look like? I mean, we could just say, okay, that's your story. Now let's talk about today.
Right.
Except that I know that, just like you said, things weren't all hunky dory as soon as you left his home. And so, what did that process of healing look like for you?
Yeah. So I definitely wanted to know more about who Jesus was. And so I wanted to make friends. I had no friends at this point.
Hmm.
And so I did two things. The first thing is I started going to my parents' church, and the bell choir of all things was looking for somebody to join. And I was like, I guess I'll join. And
I played in the bell choir. I love
it's
it.
so funny. Well, okay. So I went and it was like some kind of service where I guess college students were back and they were playing. So I thought there's going to be a bunch of people in their 20s. This is great. No, everybody there was over 50, which God knew what he was doing because I needed these like sweet, wise women to be like,
Mm,
keep me in check, which was great.
yeah.
But I joined the bell choir, and then also I ended up getting a new job, and I wanted to work somewhere that had cubicles because in shows, people that work in cubicles have like all these friends that they just go talk to. Well, the first day I was there, I got in so much trouble for talking.
Oh.
It was so, yeah, I was like, I thought I just wanted to like meet who I'm working with. And it's funny because I actually prayed to God. I was like, Lord, I had been learning about like you can actually pray for things you want. Like that's okay. I mean, he might
Yeah.
say no, but it's okay. It's okay. Like he's your good father. So I was like, God, would you send me a man of your choosing? And I was like, but the number one thing I want is for him to be patient because of everything I had gone through. And
Hmm.
the number two thing was that I wanted him to be like love his family. And number three was to be a Christian. Because at the time, obviously Christian is number one, but girl.
Yeah.
And
Let's be honest.
yeah,
We got other,
that's
desires.
right.
I
I had
get it.
other
I
things
get it.
going on because I already met a Christian, right? You know what I'm saying? And he
Yes.
wasn't a good guy. So
Yes.
yeah, so I start working in this cubicle. And the second day that I'm there, this guy comes over to help me with my computer. And I look up and I guess all I can think of, it must have been the way that his head was angled with the light. But I remember thinking there was a halo around his head, like in those Renaissance portraits of Jesus with like the golden light.
Yes.
Like that's what it looked like, right? And it's this like nerdy guy with glasses. And I just thought like immediately, like he was so nice. I was listening to music. We both happened to like metal. And I was listening
Okay.
to some at my desk, and he was like, "Oh, I know that band. I've seen them 3 times." And I was like, "What?" So we immediately started talking. And that very day, I got locked out of the parking lot. And the only person I knew was this like nerdy computer guy that had the halo on his head. So I was like, "Can you help me get out? Do you have a pass?" And he helped me. And then after that, I was like, "Would you go to lunch with me? Because I don't have any friends." And like, I wasn't looking at him in any kind of romantic interest at all. I was completely lonely, and he just seemed so dang friendly. And turned out he had a lunch date the next day with another girl, but she ended up quitting work that day.
Oh.
So all of a sudden, his lunch time opens up. We go to lunch, and I've been with that guy now for let's see, 15 years. So God knew exactly what he was doing. My husband is so patient, like probably to a fault. Like there's some things that he should get angry about, but he doesn't. Um, and everything about him, like he just the way I never met anybody talk about their mom so nice before. Like the way he talked about her, I was like, she's a saint. When I meet this woman, she's gonna be a saint. Like he just loved his family so much, and it was just
Mm,
undeniable. I just knew like, and we became friends for a while, but I knew that God sent me this man. So that was super cool. So
yeah.
God gives me this guy that I can like share life with. But then we wanted babies, all that stuff after we got married. And I go to the OBGYN, and she's like, your chances of getting pregnant are slim to none. Like it's not gonna happen. I was crying, I was crushed. And so we start praying, Lord, why would you put it on our heart to have a big family if we can't have children? So we were like,
Mm.
okay, we'll just foster everybody in the city, and I'll have like 300 children. It'll be so awesome. And right
Boy,
when we
you
started,
don't do anything halfway.
yeah,
It's like all
no,
the way or not at all.
100%. I want all the babies. Everybody listening, if you're ever questioning whether, if you want to give up your baby for adoption, just call Shannon. So, yeah, so I right when we like get into the fostering program and stuff, we end up getting pregnant. It was so
Mm.
bananas.
Mm.
Um, and then my life is after this, there's just a lot of like big Ebenezer stones, these moments where you're like, holy cow, I can't believe. But
Yeah.
when we were 32 weeks pregnant, my lung collapsed from bacterial pneumonia. It
Wow.
turns out that I was like aspirating my reflux, and it ended up making my lung collapse. And I kept telling everybody I felt so tired and just so awful. And everyone's like, that's how pregnancy is when you're so far along. And it's like, geez, how bad do we think women should feel? Like, it's stupid. I was like, really? Because I feel like passing out most of the time.
I can just feel your like, I don't know if you have an old Italian grandma, but the way you said that, I can picture your old Italian grandma just like telling you
Oh
to
yeah,
buck up and
100%.
just
And
go with
all the
it.
Italian women in my family used to smoke. They would just smoke cigarettes together and like, yes. Um, and be like, oh, whatever, you're ridiculous, you know? um, and so I just started being like, really, I just feel like I'm dying a little. Like, turns out, so we get there and they said if I came a day later, the baby would have died because it was crossing over into the placenta. And if I had
Wow.
come 3 days later, I would have died. And I had no idea. Like, and it's just so funny how, so if anybody tells you like I think I'm dying, just maybe listen a little bit. But it turned out like I was tearing the lining of my heart because my resting heart rate was like 200 beats per minute or something crazy. So we get
Wow.
this baby. They take her out early because my lung will not inflate.
Mm.
And she's 2 weeks old at this point. I'm nursing, I'm breastfeeding. And when you're breastfeeding, like your body just kind of has a natural clock. You're like, oh, it's been X amount of time. I guess I gotta go nurse the baby.
Mm-hmm.
Well, X amount of time passed. I think it was like 3 hours. And I was like, that's really weird that she's not crying. Like, I'm gonna go check on her. And I go in and she wasn't breathing. She was a completely different color. She wasn't moving. And I
Wow.
screamed out. I was like, oh, Jesus, Evan, call 911. Like, oh, Lord, help me. And I pick her up and she's totally like just limp and her color is just really strange. It's like this purpley blue. And
Mm.
I don't know if you've ever seen the movie 101 Dalmatians by Disney, but there's this scene where one of the puppies comes out and dies and
Yeah.
the dad rubs the back like
Uh-huh.
furiously. So
Uh-huh.
that's what God put on my mind immediately. And so I just start rubbing
Wow.
her the same way that they did in the movie. And she had all these like spit bubbles start coming out of her mouth and she started to breathe. And
Wow.
it turns out that she had what they called an acute life-threatening event. And if I didn't find her, it would have been SIDS. And so she was on a
Wow.
heart and breathing monitor for like the first year of her life. And that was our first baby.
Oh my
And
gosh.
I know. And the crazy thing is, too, she ended up being one of our children with autism. And
Mm-hmm.
so obviously I have like the mom guilt of like, is it because I had pneumonia? Is it because she almost
Mm.
died? Like, what is it that, but we're never going to know. But
Right.
none of
Right.
the baby books would work with her. I kept being like, I'm the worst mom because nothing is working. All my friends would give me advice, whatever. And like, as she was getting older, like nothing was working. And I just thought, what
Mm.
is going on with me? So then we have our second son, our second child, our first son, who I'm pregnant with him. They tell me it's a miscarriage that's happening. We pray about it. Turns out he was not a miscarriage. He was eventually born. God is just so awesome. Like there's
I was
so
gonna
many.
say, do you like have shirts that say "We are the miracle family"?
I know. I'm telling you, I almost feel like a brat sometimes when I'm like, well, God, I mean, he did protect us again. Or like, I did pray that I would have a son and he gave it to me. Like, I feel kind of like a brat, but I did. I was like, Lord, would you give me the first baby? I was like, would you give me a daughter? Every time I've been like, would you give me a blah, blah, blah? He does it. I don't know why. I don't know why. Because I'm
Mm.
not like a health and wealth gospel kind of girl. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Oh my gosh.
yeah, it's just crazy. Well, then he's completely different than her, but he's still a weirdo. So now I have these two really weird kids, and everybody, including my husband and I, are like, well, we're really weird. So that's probably why they're really weird. Like, obviously, like my husband probably has autism. Like, everybody, he's like, it's pretty sure. It's like, I feel like he's got it. And so then we have our third kid. And now at this point, we have 3 kids under 3. And this
Wow.
baby is like a little sweet baby angel that also broke me mentally having 3 kids. Like it was like, what is
Mm-hmm.
happening? But she was a sweet angel. And that's when I started realizing how different the other kids were because some
Ah,
advice would actually work for her, if that makes any sense. Like
that makes
people would
perfect
tell me
sense.
what yeah, they would, and it was like, oh, interesting, and she would hit her developmental milestones correctly, and the other kids are off spinning in a circle or like gagging on food, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Um so we found out that our two eldest children actually have autism, and when we had our so that was, a pretty crazy diagnosis. Part of me felt really relieved because I was like, I knew I'm a good mom. Like I knew that there was something off. Like I just knew it. And the other part of me was like, oh no, like they have autism. This is awful.
Yeah.
But no, they're great. They're awesome kids. They teach me a lot about God's love for me because I do things wrong all the time and I'm a weirdo and God still loves me.
Talk about
And
that moment when you got that diagnosis. Like,
mhm,
like how did you? I mean, you just told us a little bit about how you responded, but
mhm,
it, whenever anyone gets a life changing diagnosis,
mhm.
it takes some time to process.
Yes.
How
Yes.
did you guys get through that as a couple?
Mhm,
Because also sometimes those
mhm.
life changing diagnoses can actually really weigh on a marriage. How did you guys get through that individually and together?
Yeah, well, first of all, you're totally right because I read some statistic that 50% of marriages of special needs children separate, like they dissolve.
Yeah.
So that was crazy. That was like, I think, like in a handbook or something they gave me, like for autism. I don't know. It was
Wow.
weird, like how I got the information. But I think that first of all, I knew that God gave me my husband because I prayed for him. And I knew that God gave me these children because I prayed for them. And so it was like I had this
Mm.
responsibility of feeling like I they were gifts. And so I was looking at them, I guess, differently.
Mm.
But as far as getting the diagnosis, it was really scary. Like I was thinking things like they're never going to go to college, they're not going to get married, they're not going to have friends, and then just basic things like my life is so difficult. Like I don't at some points I have to bring three of my children to therapy every week. It's like
Yeah.
we do therapy like some families do soccer. You know what I'm saying? Like we're up to therapy again. Like um, but yeah, I don't know. I think that the only way that we got through it was really leaning on each other and just picking each other up and encouraging each other. And then also, prayer, like
Mm.
a lot of spending time with God because we got a lot of pushback from my family, the Italians, like, she doesn't have autism, or, like, why are you even getting a label? That's ridiculous. Like, you
Mm.
just need to be stricter on your kids. You need to be tougher. And it just, I don't know, just weird stuff. And so we had a lot of pushback from people, which, by the way, I know I'm kind of rambling, but if one of your all's friends says, like, I think my child might have special needs,
Hmm.
at that point, it might be better to be like, tell me why. Why do you think that? As opposed to saying something like, no way. Like they're so great. They look so normal. They're so pretty or whatever it is. Just be like, why
Hmm.
do you think that? Let's talk about it together. Because
Yeah.
that was something that was really tough for me is I felt guilty first of all for even bringing it up. Like that takes a lot of guts to be like, I think
Wow.
my kid might have special needs. And then you feel guilty like maybe I caused it as a mom. Like maybe people are going to judge me as a mom because of this. So anyways, it would be really nice to be a good listener if somebody is struggling in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I like that. That's really good advice because I think sometimes it's hard to know what to say. And so we want to
Mhm.
like, we're looking at our friend who's already struggling and we
Mhm.
want to try to take away some of their pain and we
Mhm.
want to try to make it a like positive situation instead of a
Right.
negative situation.
Mhm.
And so, and then in, and then it's hard
Mhm.
because it's like, well, I'm going to
Mhm.
try to make, light of the situation. What you're saying is,
Mhm.
no, 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 help me talk through this. Help me
Right.
process this a bit. Don't try to push it to the side or act like it's not a big deal because it is a
Right.
big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, with you had a fourth baby,
Mhm.
and
My
God once
genetic disorder
again
baby.
gave you a special gift.
Yeah, he did. He
Yeah.
did. My fourth son, his name is Luca. It means bringer of light. And
Mm.
he is like just he is like a little ray of sunshine. He's such a darling. He's a wonderful baby. Um, he, I don't remember how he found out the first time. Oh, he wasn't growing very well. It wasn't like he was thin. He was chubberific. Like he was a chubber, but he was really short. And like, so he was this like squatty baby. And he kept being like way shorter than his friends. And people would be like, "Oh my goodness, is your baby 1?" And you're like, "No, he's like almost 3 or whatever."
Uh-huh.
So we went to a endocrinologist who ran all these tests, and they wanted us to make sure at first that it wasn't a heart issue. And he had to get a heart scan. And sorry, I'm drinking an energy drink and then I just had a bubble. Okay. Anyway, so he had to get a heart scan and they found 2 holes in his heart. And I guess at this point of his life, when they found the holes, it was concerning because sometimes a baby can have a hole in their heart in utero, but it normally will close up before they come out.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's also something that like 25% of the population has, by the way. It's a flap on the top of their heart that is supposed to close, but instead it doesn't close and it can cause a murmur, which is really interesting. That's, you know what? Okay. That's how we found, this is how we found out he had holes in his heart. This is how I just remembered. Okay. So my son had and has bloody eczema. Like his skin just gets ripped up as a baby. And so we brought him to a specialist to take care of his skin. And the specialist, when my son is 18 months old, listens to his heart. And he listens again. He's like, huh. He goes out of the room and gets a digital stethoscope, listens again. And he goes, "You are aware of your son's heart murmur, right?" And I was like, "What? No, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "Oh, his chest is really muddy. There's a murmur in and out." And I was like, "What are you talking?" Like, he's 18 months old and the pediatrician never told me. Are you kidding me? Like, and it was that clear of a heart murmur. He then called in a student to hear it. Like, listen to the
You're like, this is not good when we are the case study.
Like, it's like a medical case where a student can easily hear that. That's excellent. So,
but I love when God does that. He sends you in for one thing so that a much bigger deal can be discovered.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know. He's so cool. I love him. So yeah, they found out he had the holes in his heart, and then he ended up having to get this test on his growth hormone. So he has a growth hormone disorder, which basically means that his body isn't producing what he needs. And sometimes that can happen from like a pituitary gland issue. It's something to do with hormones that are released. Okay. So he got this test and he wasn't even able to complete the test. He ended up passing out. It was awful. They had to like have all these nurses run in. It was just crazy. But they were like, yeah, his numbers are super duper low. So he has to have injections every night, which as a mom, having to inject your 18-month-old kid like, it's just awful. And he just turned 4 and it still sucks so bad. Yeah. Like, I hate it. You would think I'd be used to it by now, and I'm not. And he's such a trooper, and we have to do it on his thigh. And afterwards he might say things like, "Mommy, you made me bleed." And you're like, "I'm sorry." Like, don't say that. Yeah. So, but God is good because they thought, like his holes are not going to close. We have to monitor him. Well, he just had his checkup at 3.5 years, and they spent 3 hours looking at his heart, like from every different angle at the VCU Children's Hospital. It's an amazing place. And they were like, unbelievably, his holes have closed. The only thing he now has is a flap. Wow. He still has that flap, but they were like, that's fine because 25% of the population has it. So that was just so exciting to hear, because it was, honestly, it's going to sound terrible, but I didn't even pray to God to close his holes. Like, I didn't even think of doing that. I just kind of thought, this is how he is. I don't know. And then God was like, "I've got really good plans for you, and I'm going to do this,"
Is that how you hear God in your head when he's talking to you?
Yeah, it depends. It depends on the day. When I talk about God to my kids, I always do this like deep voice, which who knows? I don't know how we really.
Yeah, Shannon, as I'm listening to your story, like it's an overwhelming story in the fact that, I mean, you've had a lot of struggle and a lot of hurt and situations. You never really know how you're going to react to a situation until you're actually in it. And I feel like when you're outside of it, our response is, I could never survive. I could never do that. I could never be in her shoes because I wouldn't make it. and yet we listen to you and you laugh and you have joy. I mean, obviously we can hear that some parts are painful for you. And you mentioned earlier that you're at a point now where you can talk about your testimony without crying.
Mhm.
But how is it that you have this inexpressible joy when, I mean, in all honesty, what you've been through would break the strongest of men and women. How is it that you're so joyful?
You are so sweet. And I don't know. I think God just made me this way because, I've gone to therapy and stuff, which I highly recommend anybody that, therapy is great, even just for being like, I don't know what to do in my job. Just go to therapy. It's great. But they would always be like, um, also like, okay, so my father's an alcoholic. There's just a lot of things that are in my family that are crazy. And so
Yeah.
the therapist is always like, you shouldn't be this way. Like out of all the things you've been through, you're an enigma. You make no sense. So that's pretty cool too, because you know what? That's me. Like I get to witness to my therapist. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it's all
So
God.
you're not a medical enigma like maybe your children, but you are a
Yeah.
therapeutic
Yeah. I'm a mental
counseling
enigma. They're like, why is she so crazy amazing? I don't know. But yeah.
girl. There are so many shirts that I'm thinking like, yeah, I'm a mental enigma right there. See, you've got like 2 or 3 that you need to
That's
have as a
exactly.
family.
I don't know. And also, so besides podcasting, I'm also a hairstylist and
Hmm.
I'm really chatty. And I think that God made me so bubbly and outgoing and chatty and encouraging because A, when you're in my chair, I'm probably going to witness to you. Sorry. And then B, he just knows that like I'll talk about him so easily. Like
Mm.
it's just, I think that he kind of pours through me and that's what keeps me having energy to be this way. That's all like, because yeah, when I hear my story and I'm like listening to it from an outsider's point of view, it's like, dude, that's crazy. That's mental. But
Yeah.
I don't know. And I really don't know. All I can say is it's a God thing. I think that, yeah, it's just a God thing. And he's amazing.
So if you are talking to a mom who has just received a special needs diagnosis for
Mm-hmm.
her kids, what
Mm-hmm.
would be your advice to her or him,
Yeah.
the couple?
Yeah. I would say I'm so sorry and that I know that it seems overwhelming right now and difficult, but you're a really good mom that you went to go find out more about your child. You are such a good mom that you didn't ignore your intuition. God
Mm.
made you such a smart mom. And I would say it's going to be okay and take your time and you're going to do research. There's all these different things out there, but at the end of the day, you're always going to just have to keep trusting your gut got you to this point now, and God, as long as you're praying to the Lord, he's going to lead you. So just lean on him and it's going to
Yeah.
be okay.
Mm.
Also, there was this really cool I don't know if other special needs moms have heard this before, but either way, I'm going to share it.
Yeah.
They say, imagine that you have been saving up for years to go to Italy, and you've read all the travel guides, all the books, you've packed your suitcase perfectly, you are getting on the plane, and you are going to go to Italy, and you have everything mapped out. It's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the plane lands, and you come out, and you can't wait to see Rome, and you are in Holland and you look around and you're super confused because you didn't plan for this. You
Mm-hmm.
didn't pack for this. You didn't study for this. Nobody around you gave you, travel advice about Holland. And yet here you are.
Mm.
Well, Holland is still beautiful. It's not Italy. It's not what you planned, but Holland is still beautiful.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that when I first got the diagnosis, and it kind of like, it just made so much sense to me. I was like,
Mm.
okay, so it's normal to feel like, what the heck?
Yeah.
And it's normal to be like confused and be like, oh man, this isn't what I planned for. But at the same time, it's like, well, you've landed. So now it's time to figure out what you can about Holland.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Wow. Because that is, I mean, you're dealing with a shock.
Right.
Yeah. And so, but then you don't want to think of it as a negative thing. It's a beautiful thing It's your
Mhm.
child that
Mhm.
God has given you.
Mhm.
And wow, I love that analogy. I think it really puts it in a really understandable place for
Mhm.
all of us. You gave us one suggestion for those of us
Mhm.
that have a friend who might be thinking their child has a special needs diagnosis.
Mhm.
It is there another piece of advice that you have for us in how we can uh, benefit our friends, help our friends, and not hurt them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's probably a pet peeve of mine. And listen, I know everybody like means well. When you're really good friends with somebody, they could say anything and you're gonna love them. It's fine.
Yeah.
I think it's like more of the acquaintances that I'm I would be talking to.
Mm-hmm.
The thing when they say, but she looks so normal, or but
Mm.
she's so pretty, or when they second guess the diagnosis, things like that. It's like that mom and dad have been through so much to get to this point. Just go with what the mom and dad are saying. I think that for
Mm-hmm.
me is like a super big pet peeve.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a good friend and she is always concerned about like, so our first daughter's name's Evangeline. It means messenger of God. She'll
Okay.
say, how can will Evangeline be okay with this? Will Evangeline be all right with that? Should I do this? And she like really cares in a way where I know like when she's making lunch, she'll separate Evangeline's food if we're eating at her house. Just little things like that where it's like I
Mm.
can see that she's like giving me a break by doing all the caring for my daughter when we're hanging out. So it's just really
Mm.
nice. It's really nice. So yeah,
Kind
asking people like how can I help practically would be
mm.
good.
Getting to know not just them, but their child as well,
Yes.
so that the
Yes.
mom doesn't have to be worried that you're going to serve a
Right.
food that their daughter doesn't like
Right.
or,
And also,
yeah.
people with special needs, they can do really odd things sometimes. And I think sometimes moms are like scared to share it with their family that, oh, Shannon Early's kids have special needs or whatever.
Mm.
Like it's almost like a faux pas. And I think you need to have an honest conversation. Like sometimes her daughter might do XYZ, but it's because she has autism and blah, blah, blah. This is how we should react. And,
Yeah.
I think it would just be helpful to explain that to people.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can. I mean, my kids can be oddballs, and that's something too. Like you can still laugh if their kid does something like ridiculous, and the mom's like, "What the heck?" and you can laugh too. It's okay. Like you don't have to feel
Yeah.
bad about it. It's okay.
Well, and I think then it allows people to respond appropriately. Knowledge is power, right?
Yeah.
Knowledge is love, and so they can love your kids, even if this is the first time they're meeting them. They can love them better if they know
Yep.
what to expect. And I don't know. Sometimes I think it's like, oh, she has autism. Like it needs to be
Right.
like whispered because it's a
Exactly.
bad thing. But you're like, you can whisper it or you can shout it. It doesn't change the fact
Mhm.
that my daughter has autism or my son has
Mhm.
autism. They
Mhm.
have autism, and I would rather so that you can understand my child better than
Exactly.
have it be like whispers through the hallway.
Right.
That
Exactly.
makes
And
a lot of
then like
sense.
you don't think the kid has behavior issues. You like understand. Oh, okay, this is
Yes.
what's going on.
Yeah.
Exactly. Exactly.
Gosh, well, Shannon, thank you for everything that you have given us. Before we move on to our last question, how can we find your podcast and find you more online?
Thanks so much for asking. So, my podcast is wherever you stream some music or whatever. So, like Spotify, iTunes, all that stuff. It's Mamas Need Love.
Okay.
Also, I have a Facebook group. It's called Mamas Need Love, surprisingly, and you can join it. It's just for moms to show up authentically. I think right now we're all missing community. So it's like a little
Yeah.
virtual community. It's brand new, it's growing, and it's exciting. And then my website, mamasneedlove.com, and you can find out more about me, and I have a little 5-day prayer guide that you can download for free. So just stuff like that.
Awesome. Well, at the end of every episode, we ask our guest. So none of us are meant to live life alone. And we've already talked about the importance of community and how we can benefit
Mhm.
our community if special needs is a part of their family. So who is it that has helped you along in your life journey?
That's a great question. MOPS. I don't know if you guys have heard of
Mm.
MOPS, but they pulled me out when I was drowning in children and they helped me. I think sometimes as a mom, you can get bogged down, it's just like the
Yeah.
monotony of every single day doing the exact same thing, but it's like it's just bananagrams. And
Mm-hmm.
mops helped me like get out of my house, brush my teeth, and put some makeup on. They gave you
Mm-hmm.
free food and free childcare. And when I began going, at first I was like not even that into it, but there was free childcare for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And then I just kept going because of that. And eventually, like, I became obsessed, and I ended up meeting two of my best friends there. And
Mm.
so I would highly encourage anybody out there, whether you have special needs kids or not, go find a MOPS or a Mom's Next group. They take you, they're Christian, and they can take you as long as you have a kid in some sort of grade level, whether it be through high school or whatever, they'll take you. So
Mm.
that's what
And do you sometimes those community groups can be a struggle for those that have special needs kids.
helps.
Do you have a suggestion for a mama who's like, I really want to go to MOPS, but I don't know if they'll accept my child?
That's a really good question. I think people are really ill-equipped to handle taking care of children with special needs. I
Mm-hmm.
agree with that. I would say talk to the director of that MOPS group and come up with ideas together, because sometimes they'll be able to hire a worker that spends time with just your child, like
Okay.
one-on-one. They can do that stuff. I mean, it depends. Some MOPS groups are more limited, but it does depend. And it is hard. I think before I found MOPS, I felt uncomfortable really going a lot of places because my kids would be running through the parking lot, or just, whatever, they'd be eating grass, like
Uh-huh.
whatever it was. So I felt, but MOPS was the first place where they were like, oh, your kids have special needs. Okay. List all the things we need to know. Okay, great. Go in the meeting, have a good time. And I was like,
Wow.
what? Are you sure? Yep,
Mm-hmm.
go on in there. Also, like, my church has something called Through the Roof Ministry, and it comes from when the four people lifted the was it paraplegic, quadriplegic guy? He was on a mat.
Yeah,
They
not a
lifted him up and
quadriplegic,
then
but
they
yeah.
put him through the roof so he could be with Jesus. So my
Mm-hmm.
church has something called the Through the Roof Ministry, and so they welcome people with special needs. There's like a whole room for people, and it's just like there's helpers. So if somebody comes with special needs, the helper will sit in the row with the family. So that's great.
Wow.
But not all churches
Wow.
have that.
Yeah.
They don't all have it.
Yeah. Yeah. I know that that's a need in
Mm-hmm.
so many churches, and some churches do that really, really well. And there's
Right.
a really strong ministry there to be had if you have the people that are able to reach out to those families, and that have the know-how, the knowledge to help those parents, because to be able to sit in a service with
Mm-hmm.
when you are a parent of special needs. I have friends that are like, man, the first time that I got to sit through a whole service
Mm-hmm.
and didn't get called out to come
Mm-hmm.
and help with some type of behavioral issue,
Mm-hmm.
I I had no idea that I had missed it so much. And it
Yeah,
was a
it's golden.
huge
You need it.
blessing. Yeah.
Yes. These
Yeah.
moms definitely need Jesus poured into them, because their cup is overflown with a lot of difficulty, and it's really hard
Mhm.
being a special needs mom. I think it's hard being a mom of children regardless, obviously, but
Mhm.
being a
Yeah.
special needs mom has extra stuff that comes with it. And
Yeah.
so we can feel lonely or isolated or embarrassed. There's just so many different things. So
Yeah.
just telling the mom, like, I see you, you're welcome here. It's okay if your kid's acting like this. Let's just sit together.
Yeah.
That's great.
Well, Shannon, thank you for all that you've shared with us. Listeners, go visit mamasneedlove.com. Go check out her podcast, her community on Facebook. As you can see, I mean, it's not going to be boring. It's going to be fun. It's going to be joyful, but it's also going to be truthful. So it's definitely a place you want to go and check out. So thank you, Shannon, for all that you've shared with us today.
You are super welcome. Thank you.